She didn't steal my money. She stole my meaning. The day she left for Paris, I stood by the window, watching the sunlight spill across her suitcase, the one I bought her years ago when she first dreamed of seeing the world. "It's Paris, Mom. Don't look so worried. I'll pay you back." She laughed, her voice wrapped in excitement and perfume. I smiled. I even waved. But my heart, it stayed behind, pressed against the glass, watching the woman I raised walk away with the life I'd quietly built for her. That money wasn't for travel. It was my safety, my quiet collection of years, every skipped dinner, every winter without heat, every "I'll be fine," I whispered to myself. And now, it was gone. The house felt louder after she left. Every clock tick, a reminder that I had given too much for too long to someone who no longer saw me as a mother, just a resource. When she returned, the house was silent, the lights off, the drawers empty, and a single note waiting on the kitchen table. "You finally taught me how to leave." Hi, my name is Margaret Cole. I'm 58 years old, and until recently, I thought I knew what a mother's purpose was: to give, to sacrifice, to forgive endlessly. For 30 years, that's what I did. I was the kind of mother who saved every receipt, stretched every dollar, and stayed awake through every storm just to make sure my daughter, Laura, never felt the kind of fear I grew up with. I worked as a librarian. Quiet work, soft hands, small dreams. But every month, I tucked away a few bills into an account. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Our safety. Our future. A promise that if life ever got too hard, she'd have something solid to stand on. When Laura got older, she called me her rock. She said I was her reason to dream, and I believed her. Because every time she smiled, I saw my husband's eyes, the man I lost too soon, the one I'd sworn to honor by keeping our little family safe. But life changes quietly. Calls got shorter, visits became rare, and that warmth, that laughter that once filled this home began to fade. Then one morning, I logged into my bank account and froze. Every dollar gone, transferred to a name I knew by heart, Laura Cole. At first, I thought it was a mistake, but when I read her message, "Don't be upset, Mom. I'll pay you back when I can," something inside me didn't just break. It fell silent. Because I finally realized she didn't just take my savings. She took for granted the woman who built them. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there, staring at the screen, at the zero that blinked back like an open wound. 20 years of careful living, gone with a single click. I called her. Once, twice. By the third time, I could barely breathe. When she finally texted back, her words were casual, thoughtless. "Mom, don't be dramatic. It's Paris. You've always said life's about experiences." Experiences? Mine had been waiting in grocery store lines, clipping coupons, skipping new shoes so she could have ballet lessons. That night, I sat at the kitchen table where her laughter used to live, where she used to braid her doll's hair and tell me about her dreams. Now, it was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator, and the sound of something inside me collapsing. I scrolled through her photos the next day, smiling by the Eiffel Tower, sipping coffee in Montmartre, wrapped in the kind of joy money buys easily, but love can't afford. Each picture felt like a confession, each caption like a cut. My friends told me, "You raised her too softly." Maybe I did. but I never thought kindness could become currency. That night, I took her framed photo off the shelf, the one from her college graduation, me in the back, clapping, proud, invisible. And for the first time in my life, I whispered the truth out loud. You didn't betray my trust, Laura. You betrayed the mother who trusted you. And that's when I knew this story wasn't about her trip to Paris. It was about my journey to finally leave. I didn't pack out of anger. I packed out of silence. That deep kind that comes when you realize the person you love most stopped hearing you long ago. I started with the photos. One by one, I took them off the walls. Our birthdays, our Christmas mornings, her first day of school. Each frame was a chapter of a life I'd built around someone who had already moved on. Then I sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I once taught her to read, and began writing. Laura, you always dreamed of Paris. I hope it was everything you wanted. You took my savings, but not my strength. You may not know it yet, but I was saving for something much bigger. My peace. My hand trembled as I signed my name. Not Mom, not Love Mother, just Margaret. It felt strange, freeing, final. I placed the letter on the counter, next to the old teapot, the one we used to share on cold mornings. Then I walked through every room, touching the walls like they were old friends. I didn't leave out of anger. I left because I finally realized home isn't a place you build for others. It's the space you reclaim for yourself. And as the door closed behind me, I didn't cry this time. I only whispered to the empty house, "Goodbye, Margaret. Welcome back. Me."
The bus smelled faintly of salt and rain. Outside the window, the city I'd spent my life in grew smaller until it disappeared, like a wound closing on its own. I didn't have a plan. Just a small suitcase, an envelope of cash, and a heart that finally understood the price of being needed only for convenience. Hours passed. The road unrolled beneath the tires like a second chance. Every mile between me and that house felt like a breath I'd been holding for years. When I finally stepped off in a quiet coastal town called Crescent Bay, the air smelled of sea and freedom. I rented a tiny room above a bakery, small enough to feel safe, large enough to start again. The first night, I couldn't sleep, not because I missed her, but because the silence didn't ache anymore. I made tea the next morning, not for two, just for me, and watched the sunlight crawl across the floorboards. It felt peaceful. I started volunteering at the town's library, dusting old shelves, helping strangers find words that meant something. And for the first time, I realized maybe I'd been saving for this all along, not for security, not for her, but for the woman who finally decided she deserved to live her own story. And that woman's name was Margaret Cole. 3 months later, the sea had become my companion. Each wave felt like a heartbeat reminding me, you're still here. Then one evening, as the sky turned the color of ash and rose, my phone rang, a number I hadn't seen in months. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because peace, once found, is fragile, and her voice carried the weight of the world I'd finally put down. The next day, a letter arrived at the library. Neat handwriting, my name on the front. It was from Laura. "Mom, I came home and you were gone. I found your note on the table. I thought I'd feel angry, but I can't stop crying. Paris wasn't what I imagined. Every street reminded me of what I took from you, Mom. You were never the problem, Mom. I was." I read it 3 times. Not because I needed to, but because I could finally read it without breaking. That night, I sat by the window overlooking the ocean and whispered, "She's learning. The world's teaching her now." And for the first time since she left, I didn't ache to go back. I only prayed that she'd find the version of herself who could finally understand the value of love that never asked for anything in return. The waves outside crashed softly, and I realized forgiveness doesn't always begin with words. Sometimes it begins with distance.
It was late afternoon when I saw her. I was watering the small garden behind the library, the air filled with salt and sunlight, when a shadow stopped at the gate. I didn't need to look twice. A mother always knows. She stood there, Laura, thinner, paler, her hair tangled, a tremor in her hands. Gone was the sparkle from Paris, the glossy smile from her photos. What stood before me now wasn't pride. It was remorse, shaped like a daughter. "Mom?" Her voice cracked, soft as rain. I didn't rush to her, didn't scold her, didn't cry. I just looked, really looked, at the girl I'd raised and at the woman she was finally becoming. She took a few hesitant steps forward. "I looked everywhere. The house, your friends. I thought you—" Her voice broke completely. "I thought you died." Something inside me shifted. Not pity, understanding. Because maybe that version of me had died. The one who lived only through her daughter's needs. I placed the watering can down and said quietly, "You found me, Laura. That's what matters." She ran to me then. No hesitation, no walls, and collapsed into my arms. For a long time, we just stood there, the ocean humming behind us, our tears falling into the soil like roots, finding home again. Between sobs, she whispered, "I thought I'd come back to give you things, but you already had everything I never understood." I brushed her hair back and smiled, small, tired, full of peace. "No, sweetheart, I didn't have everything, but now I have enough." She cried harder, clutching me like the child she used to be, and in that moment, I realized something quietly profound. Forgiveness isn't a grand gesture. It's just choosing to hold someone again after they've forgotten what your arms feel like. The days that followed were slow and fragile, like sunlight trying to break through a fog. Laura stayed with me in the small cottage by the sea. No Paris dresses, no polished smiles, just a girl wearing guilt like a second skin. She offered to cook one morning. She burned the eggs, broke a plate, and laughed nervously, and I realized I hadn't heard that laugh, that real laugh, in years. Over tea, she finally said it.
I thought success meant leaving you behind. I thought growing up meant not needing you anymore. Her voice trembled. But when I was standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, I kept wishing you were there. Not for the photos, just to see it with me. I didn't interrupt her. I let the silence do what time couldn't. She looked at me, tears filling her eyes. You didn't just give me money, Mom. You gave me my wings, and I used them to fly away from you. I reached across the table and held her hand, not as a wounded mother, but as a woman who had finally outgrown her pain. Maybe that's what mothers do, Laura, I said softly. We give everything until they learn how to fly, and sometimes crash. But when they do, we're still here, not waiting, just ready. She cried harder then, clutching me like the child she used to be. That night, as we walked along the beach, she leaned her head on my shoulder, whispering, "You were my home, Mom. I just didn't know it until I left." The stars flickered above us like small forgivenesses, and I realized something deep and unshakable. Sometimes love doesn't return to where it began. It finds its way back to where it belongs.
The next morning, the air smelled like rain. Soft, cleansing, new. Laura was sitting by the window, holding the letter I'd left behind months ago. Her fingers trembled as she traced my handwriting, the same way I used to trace her cheek when she was little. She turned to me, her eyes swollen but clear. "I read this 100 times, she whispered. "I wanted to hate you for leaving, but every line felt like love I didn't deserve." I poured her a cup of tea, the same kind I used to make when she had nightmares. She smiled faintly. "You still remember how I like it. 2 sugars, no milk." "Mothers don't forget, Laura," I said softly, "even when they're forgotten." We sat in silence, the kind that heals instead of hurts. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. "Can I come home, Mom?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Not at the girl who broke me, but at the woman trying to rebuild herself. Home isn't a place. It's what you carry when you finally learn to stay. Her tears fell, slow and heavy. "I don't deserve you." I smiled gently. "That's the thing about love, sweetheart. It's never about deserving. It's about choosing." She reached for my hand, and I saw it. The flicker of the same child who once ran into my arms after every scraped knee. I squeezed her hand. "I'm choosing peace now, Laura. You can visit it, but I won't lose it again." Her lips trembled, and she nodded, understanding. Outside, the rain began to fall, but for the first time in years, it didn't sound like sorrow. It sounded like something being washed clean, the past, the pain, and everything we couldn't say. The morning after she left, the cottage felt quiet again, but not empty this time. There was a peace that hung in the air, soft as the sea breeze that carried through the open window. I made myself a cup of tea and sat where she had sat the night before. Her teacup was still there,
a small lipstick stain on the rim, a tiny proof that love, even broken, had come home for a while. I looked out at the ocean, its endless rhythm reminding me that even waves that crash still return to shore. And maybe that's what motherhood truly is. A rhythm of giving, breaking, forgiving, and loving again. I once believed love meant sacrifice. Now I know love also means stepping away, so that the people you raised can finally meet the person they hurt inside themselves. Laura had come back not to fix me, but to face her reflection. And in doing that, she gave me the one thing I thought I'd lost forever: peace. I smiled, a quiet, knowing smile, because somewhere in Paris, there's a photo of her under the Eiffel Tower, and somewhere in Crescent Bay, there's a photo of me by the sea. Both pictures show women who finally understood what freedom costs, and how forgiveness gives it back. As the sun rose higher, I whispered to the waves, I was never gone. I was just waiting to be found, not by her, but by myself. And in that moment, I realized this story wasn't about losing a daughter. It was about finding the woman who raised her. Because sometimes the most powerful kind of love is the kind that learns to let go and still loves anyway.